This is Talkkcade, a blind review podcast, this week reviewing the July 11th WWF Monday Night RAW and July 12th ECW Hardcore TV. I'm your host, Adby Devon, who is watching through 1994 WWF, ECW, and WCW content on a week-by-week basis from a first-time viewer's perspective. No WCW Saturday night review during this edition, but given that it falls on the same day as the upcoming ECW Supercard, those two will be reviewed on the next edition of Talkkcade. So, before we get started, I just want to ask that you drop a thumbs up on this video, as it helps us a lot. Do subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell to always on for notifications. Talkkcade always seems to come out at some random hour of the night and not always on the same night, so you want to catch it when it drops. Do drop a comment below about the review or the shows themselves. Would love to hear everyone's thoughts about the shows, one way or another. That all being said, let's dive into WWF Monday Night RAW. So we open straight into a recap package with Jim Ross narrating 1-2-3 Kid's tenure in the WWF thus far, starting with his own win over Razor and leading up to his most recent showing against Nikolai Volkov. Glad they're finally putting Jim Ross to use. We haven't seen or heard from him since WrestleMania 9. We got a clip from Bret Hart from the WWF Hall of Fame ceremony the previous month, where he heavily put over 1-2-3 Kid as one of the best pound-for-pound competitors in this day and age. I'm starting to see how this match came about, and I think it's awesome that it did. This led us to the return of the bangin' as always intro, which was absent last week. Speaking of Jim Ross, we're welcomed to Raw in Bushkill, Pennsylvania by Randy Savage and none other than JR himself, in the place of Gorilla, in the place of Vince. Randy got some interesting gear today. Red, yellow, and green and patches. It's not bad, but it's not hitting like his others in the past have. They hype up the WWF title match and were sent down to the curtain as 1-2-3 Kid's music hit. And it was like, oh wait, they're opening with it? This gives me Rampage vibes. A 1-hour show opening up with the main event. That being said, I was ready. I was looking forward to this match as soon as they announced it 3 weeks ahead of time, just because that alone made me feel like this was going to be worth it. I got a lot to say about this match. I'll likely consume Raw's portion of this review because it was a stellar match for several reasons. In all honesty, it had no business being as good as it was, but both of these competitors clearly saw the opportunity to do something special here. Overall, just seeing the 1-2-3 Kids grow since coming to WWF has been awesome. In the land of the Giants, coming off the golden age of wrestling, he's standing out. So, before we get into the match, we get an appearance that would have you think this match wasn't going to end clean. Just as Bret was finishing up his entrance, Jim Neidhart and the King of Hearts himself popped up ringside. They get on the apron and antagonize Bret, with Owen gesturing to the belt and to a crown. He was effectively saying that Bret is defending the title against 1-2-3 Kid instead of Owen Hart because he's scared. Eventually, officials have them removed, and Bret and Kid complete the Code of Honor with a pre-match handshake to start us off. So, Jesse was adamant I not get distracted with notes or anything on watching this match, and it was clear why early on. It was an instant classic. This match told a main story in 2 parts, and I think the crux of it is both men being babyface to the bone at this time. 1-2-3 Kid wanted to defend the title, but only if he was definitively the better wrestler. Bret wanted to defend the title successfully, but only if he was definitively the better wrestler. And you get that even right out the gate. A game 1-2-3 Kid with a snap arm drag that even has Bret taking note. They feel each other out, taking their time to get into that Roman knuckle grip. Bret tried to change trajectory with his grappling, but 1-2-3 Kid still took him to the mat. Bret even resorted to a scoop slam on Kid, who just kipped right back into stance. He was here and ready to go. 1-2-3 Kid has some game kicks, but he was mostly technical wrestling, and I found that interesting. I think a beat of the tail here was the style changes in this match. 1-2-3 Kid is known for his high-flying ability here in the WWF. And smart fans and indie fans of this time probably knew of his more well-roundedness, but to the average WWF viewer, he's a high flyer. 1-2-3 Kid came in to wrestle, and Bret came to compete against a high flyer. This is why 1-2-3 Kid had control early on, and Bret had to start throwing his weight around a bit more. Bret's one of the greatest wrestlers in all of the times, but we've come to see that he is, at this point, a game plan wrestler. His character develops a plan and likes to stick to it. Ergo, Diesel. He came in planning to wrestle down a high flyer and had to make it be about overpowering a technical wrestler. Honestly, a sign of a great champion. Interesting enough, to my point, Jesse pointed out how Bret started throwing European uppercuts on Kid in the corner, something people here in the States at this time don't often do, particularly Bret. Some would say he's just healing up for the crowd, and maybe that's true to a degree. But I think this is more about establishing the aforementioned style change. Something that goes against the healing up argument was how much Bret held back. Bret got Kid backed into the corner again, but was clear to not take advantage of the 5 count in the corner. Bret then hammered through 1-2-3 Kid from corner to corner, and Kid went down from a ring-rattling impact on the buckle, but Bret just stopped and let him recover instead of staying on him. He was trying to beat him, not beat him up. And a moment later, Kid went for a running crucifix on Bret, and it genuinely looked like a slip-up, but was sold like Bret slamming 1-2-3 Kid in crucifix position, so I'll call it a masterful work. He covered Kid and got the 1-2-3 count. The 1-2-3 count. Yeah, I mean, he did. Albeit, Kid's foot was on the rope. And the ref calls for the bell and declares Bret the winner. And I was so sullen, but it was quickly revived thanks to Bret's efforts. Bret noticed the rope break mid-pin and did not celebrate. He informed the ref about the rope break, getting frustrated. And another ref came down to the ring to sort it out, pointing out how blatantly obvious the rope break that the first ref missed was. It gets sorted, and we get the official announcement that the match is back on between these two by request of Bret Hart. I love this bit. I can't think of any other time I've seen this before. A babyface champion having a title match restarted because they know they shouldn't have won in the instance they did. Everything about this was fantastic. 1-2-3 Kid wasn't quite as noble, though. As we saw that during the break, he attempted to roll Bret up from behind, who wasn't quite back into the match yet. Something I also liked is the show continuity. That Double J match restart, in hindsight, felt like it set us up to believe that Bret could have made a big mistake here. Commentary bringing that up made me realize this, so I appreciate Jim Ross for that, who's calling his very first Monday Night Raw match, and man, is it going to be hard to top for some time. Back into this match now. Bret couldn't quite get control back, which resulted in a much more back-and-forth bout, having 1-2-3 Kid countering Bret's attempts at offense several times in a row. Kid started up with a comeback of sorts as he led Bret into the corner and got some key offense in with a buckle-to-buckle Irish whip and a running dropkick. This sets Bret up to take that standing moonsault. That standing moonsault that started it all. That put 1-2-3 Kid on the map when he pinned Razor Ramon. He hits him with more of a spinning crossbody than a moonsault and gets a 2 count off of it. And realistically, 1-2-3 Kid was probably just gassed as all get out by this point, but from a kayfabe perspective, you could look at Kid not hitting the move as crisp as he typically does as the reason it doesn't get him the win. I'd like to point out that I really didn't mind one way or the other. Neither did the crowd. They were completely into this match. They just got to cheer the whole time. It was great. Also, 1-2-3 Kid was not resting on his shortcomings. He got right up, pulled Bret into hit him with a powerbomb. Fucking what? Bonus points for JR immediately calling that it was the jackknife, as if this was 1-2-3 Kid taking a play out of Diesel's book, as opposed to just doing a random move. Would be extra neat if that was also foreshadowing to a 1-2-3 Kid / Diesel Intercontinental title feud. I'd be so about that. 1-2-3 Kid went up to the top and hit a diving leg drop, but still wasn't quite it. Kid took Bret to the outside, and this is where it gets a bit too overzealous for his own good. He tries to senton onto Bret on the outside and grazes him, slamming mostly onto the outside on his own, and slamming hard. Bret rolls into the ring, and Kid pulls himself up to the apron and then the top rope, tries for the senton again, and Bret dodges it. Into the sharpshooter Kid went, but he was quick to get to the ropes. Bret took him up to the top for a superplex, but it's countered into a crossbody mid-fall. It was really another corner dropkick from Kid that cost him, as Bret was wise to it by that point, and dropped him with one of the cleanest bulldogs I've ever seen. Went for a dive and missed, but was able to catch 123 Kid, who had attempted a diving dropkick, and slaps on the sharpshooter again to submit him proper for the victory. And Bret immediately consoles him over a job well done, extending his respects. He prioritizes talking to 123 Kid, hugs him, raises Kid's hand to all sides. And it felt like Bret's victory wasn't merely the title, but the match they had just then. And I think it really made me realize that Bret is the model top guy babyface. He didn't even raise his own arm or his own title, rather, not tile. Never even took it from the ref, actually. Both these men showed out, and it's awesome to see everything I love about wrestling coming together like it did here. This match was the best match I've seen on Raw through these retro watch-alongs, and probably one of the best I've seen period throughout said watch-alongs. Right up there with Cactus Jack versus Vader on Saturday night and Bret versus Owen at WrestleMania. Sorry to have spent so much time on it, but even if you discount the fact that it was over half the episode itself, it was incredible, and I fully recommend that you go watch it yourself if you haven't or don't normally watch along with what we do. I guarantee that people that were or are in the business because of this match. I didn't say that right, but you know what I'm trying to say. Sorry, midnight for me, current time of this recording. So, on to the Summerslam Report we go. And man, if my adrenaline didn't already have me on a high, I got sent on a trip with some of the bit of the news that we got in this segment. I felt like I missed something, which is possible because WWF Superstars is a thing. So, Todd Pettingill in a denim button-up short sleeve, and I can't with the 90s sometimes. He puts over how this will be the first televised event in the United Center in Chicago, which will host the show. And we're told that the main event, according to Jack Tunney's office, is Undertaker versus Undertaker. Por qué la fuck? Like, y'all have seen where my head has been with this Undertaker situation. It's not him. I know Undertaker's work. I got into wrestling because of Taker. I know that man's moves. I know that man's voice. Yes, that may be weird to some, but young Devin loved The Undertaker and Jeff Hardy growing up. So he had the merch and the posters and the DVDs and all that jazz. But enough about my detail-obsessed ass. Why was Bearer looking so incredulous after the standoff with DiBiase and fake Taker? Underfaker. Now the latter sounds more like what people went with, but it's cheesy as all hell. Then again, I see Todd Pettingill in a denim button-up short sleeve shirt, and I realize where I'm at. But yeah, in hindsight, with how money was pulling away Doppeltaker without the urn seemingly present, Paul Bearer seemed to not believe that it was the real Undertaker. His nodding in fury last week wasn't it being betrayed, it was it being deceived. I dig. We hear from Bearer via pre-tape saying that through the annals of time, people have constantly persecuted The Undertaker for his actions and beliefs. Bearer explains how Undertaker earned the respect of everyone, but Ted DiBiase is tarnishing his name, saying that it doesn't sit well with The Undertaker. He describes Undertaker's presence and his return as if he were a literal god descending to earth. Bearer caps it off, saying that it's time for the return of his Undertaker and the end of DiBiase and his Undertaker. Dope. Ball Bearer promos are always silly because of the voice, but the voice is fun. I love the character, and I dig how he presents the Undertaker like this deity that he worships. No, don't get me wrong, I'm in the camp of, why wrestle when you can just strike a man with lightning or make the ground quake? Like, Undertaker is an undead bodykeeper with superpowers? What are his superpowers? How did he get them? But then on the other hand, I give it a major pass because nostalgia. And it's a unique brand of nostalgia as well, because I've only seen mid-2000s Taker onwards, with isolated clips of him in each era, mainly focusing on his 21st century stuff. This is me seeing the origins of what my once favorite character in wrestling was. So all of the supernatural stuff is stuff I used to love in wrestling, grew to be mad about, but then came to accept. So with that all being said, I wonder if supernatural is what will fuel this food. Fuel this food to eat. No, we'll fuel this feud. Watch Ted DiBiase's Undertaker beat the manifestation of the actual Undertaker's greed or some shit like that. Literally a good taker, bad taker situation. I'd actually hate that. In my notes I put I don't think I'd like that. I think I'd actually hate that because that would be like a little too much, you know. At that point, it's not a person with superpowers, it's an entity. So, yeah. So we cut back down to the ring for Crush's entrance, and while Crush is popular amongst the WatchMania community for meme reasons, we were all going nuts in the watch-along for another Matt Hardy sighting. Out here in this high-voltage gear, and you love to see Omega representation on WWF television. Tried himself a few flippy doos like he was on the trampoline itself to avoid corner offense, but the second time around got too showy and had his soul kicked out his body. Military press slam and a backbreaker for the win. That's all it took. Randy Savage must have been ribbed or was ribbing someone because as soon as Soccer was brought up, he started yelling, "Goal!" over and over until he snapped out of it. Maybe he was just trying to pop the boys in the back. We were losing our shit during the watch-along, though, that's for sure. Nice, simple, and effective showing for Crush, though. As the post-match was wrapping up, it was said that on the previous day's WWF All-American Wrestling, one of WWF's 4 irrelevant weekly programs, that Ted DiBiase is hiring a detective over this whole Undertaker situation. Wonder how that'll go. Also wonder if that'll still be the narrative come later in the show. Spoiler alert, it's not. Watch the story be that even Ted DiBiase didn't know that he had the doppeltaker. Like, watch him genuinely be under the impression this is the real Undertaker that he just bought. We get a nice old dramatic video package for an Intercontinental title match between Lex Luger and Diesel on next week's Raw. Should be interesting. I don't think Lex is winning it, but I also know that he came to WWF with promises of being the champion, which still hasn't happened over a year into this run. So I can see a fluke title win being booked to try and appease him. I bring that up only because I can't imagine how else we'll get to this point, where Lex is challenging for the title with his recent record, and feud with Crush that seems to have just stopped. We cut over to Razor Ramon prepping for his next match, and down to ringside after a break for Razor Ramon versus Barry Horowitz. As Razor worked the arm of Barry, commentary reiterated what was said earlier about the detective, instead saying that the WWF will be hiring this detective that will investigate the 2 Undertakers, and says that we will find out who this detective is on Saturday morning WWF Mania. Again, narrative changed mid-show. I guess that was a Vince thing all of the times. So next week on Raw for us. Hopefully. Probably. Jim Ross is a great man for Macho Man to play off of as Randy Savage continued to name detectives in humorous fashion. Razor and Horowitz had a funhouse show-like match. Razor was never really in danger. Barry got gritty with Razor after the latter punched him out a few times with the slaps over the back of the head, but Razor quickly took control back. Took control back. He signaled for the Razor's Edge, but then just decided to roll the fella up instead. I got the slight impression that Barry was really hurting, so that was an improv finish, but I don't have much to go off of with that, other than that Razor was looking at the ref, pointing at Barry, and mouthed something really quick before rolling him up. Like, it was definitely a decision made in between the signaling of the Razor's Edge and the roll-up itself that he was going to do that. Again, fun house show match. If nothing else, it got Razor on TV and showed that he is capable of winning without his finisher. We cut over to an office of sorts with Jerry Lawler, and the camera pans out to reveal Ted DiBiase sitting at the desk, feet up on it, talking on the phone. DiBiase is yelling on the phone at someone to buy 10,000 shares. Not sure of what, but to buy them because money is no object, and hangs up. Aggressively, mind you. They do their talking down of the audience, relishing in their more cozy setting. Jerry Lawler runs through all that Ted DiBiase has done since returning to the WWF. Lawler notes DiBiase's purchase of Nikolai Volkov, The Undertaker, and Bam Bam Bigelow, saying that he's heard that Ted is trying to acquire Lex Luger as well. They're like trading cards, right? He's trying to build a Legacy Edition New Generation deck. No, but seriously, Ted DiBiase has outright said that he's trying to acquire Lex Luger on air. This is no grapevine secret, like Jerry Lawler's making it sound. Ted DiBiase exclaims that Lex is bought and paid for and starts laughing. Jerry seems astonished, declaring it a scoop and asking how Ted did it, which DiBiase exclaimed that he made Luger an offer he can't refuse. Eventually, Jerry got it out of the $1 million man that it wasn't exactly signed and sealed yet, but just a matter of dotting a few I's and crossing a few T's. We're told we're fortunate to have gotten this scoop of our lives here on the King's Court, and I like the segment. Both of them played their characters perfectly, and it felt like a very smooth conversation. I wonder what has changed, though. Like, why is Ted just outright saying it's a done deal? Did Ted really make him some huge offer off screen? Is it the Intercontinental title match that next week Lex is getting? Is that a doing of Ted DiBiase, is what I'm getting at? We had cut back to commentary to talk about it, who did mention that there are some rumors of Ted DiBiase being in Lex's corner next week. So that feeds into that a little bit. But how are there rumors already? Right? Like, the match hasn't been announced for 20 minutes. You've been sitting at the commentary desk this whole damn time. Regardless, if this is Ted's doing, I like that. Imagine a double turn where Nikolai and Bam Bam help Lex win the IC title from Diesel, and then he signs a contract with Ted DiBiase afterwards. I think that would be fun. That would be like a fun, like, why, Lex, why kind of thing. I think it'd be rad, actually. But yeah, then you could also turn Shawn and Diesel face, because they'd be a fun act as baby faces, I'd like to think. So IRS comes down to the ring. Taxes, cheating on your taxes. Gonna pay. Maybe these promos are masterful. Maybe there's some video on YouTube somewhere of the deep and elegant character work IRS chained together through all of these tax promos, but I can't be bothered. I just can't be bothered. Ray Hudson is his opponent this week. This is your standard IRS experience for the most part, but it's a running gag now that he has one move every match that is great or even impressive, but the rest of it before and after just drags on. This week he had a powerful shoulder tackle, damn near caved Ray's collarbone. Honestly, his pace at first was good. He really just unleashed like an onslaught of offense, and creatively got a break by throwing Ray outside instead of a rope-assisted arrest hold, though we got that just a moment later in the form of a rope-assisted abdominal stretch, then a rope-assisted leg lock. And the second half of this match was more or less the same IRS stuff, save for that shoulder tackle. Then he got the win with the STF, which didn't look quite as good as last week's. It was alright. I just don't get how he's got nothing going on yet gets on TV every week when there's an entirety of a tag team division just sitting there, not on television, including the champions themselves. So we return from a break and get a rundown for next week's episode where we will see both Mabel and Owen Hart in action alongside that Intercontinental title match. We then cut back to Bret Hart, who is congratulated by JR for his incredible match and victory. Bret takes it in kind, saying that he initially went into the match expecting to teach a wrestling lesson to 1-2-3 Kid, but it may have been the other way around. Randy Savage also commends him on the match, but wants to point out that Owen is probably happiest that Bret defended the title just because he wants to take it from Bret himself. Bret exclaims that everyone is talking about Owen, but he could quite conceivably have been a fluke. He points out that Owen has Jim Neidhart in his corner now, but that doesn't mean anything because Bret will have one of his brothers in his corner as well. He accepts Owen's challenge, telling him he knows where to find Bret. They can find out once and for all who the best in the Hart family is, and the best there was, is, and ever will be. Alright, promo from Bret there. He tripped up a few times, but he still got the point across. It would be interesting, if that was by design, and that he's doubting his own words there in kayfabe. I think that would be a neat little wrinkle of the story. You know, almost like he believes there's some truth to what Owen's saying. I don't want to give them that much credit, not just WWF, but Bret in general, just because he doesn't seem like the most crisp actor. But I'm willing to be proven wrong on that. Like, absolutely. So I hope this means that we're on for SummerSlam, and not Superstars or Raw in 2 weeks' time or something like that. Give this a big platform. But speaking of Raw, that was it. A fun one this week. Might have been the best episode of Raw up until this point. As far as I think, this was episode 60-something. I don't know. Final, just me estimating from like January, it was like January 5th or 12th or whatever when the first episode was, and they've missed like 2 weeks since then. So it's been about 60-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. We finally got our Bret Owen match. Finally. We got progress on this Undertaker situation as well, and overall just seeing growth in the product. It's good stuff. I like it. But at last, we move on to our next show, Hardcore TV, ECW Hardcore TV, NWA ECW Hardcore TV, where we start off with a video package of the Funk Brothers and Public Enemy's feud up until this point, cutting to Public Enemy in the back. They reiterate their promo from last week in the Bronx in a less engaging fashion, like ECW seems to do, or seems to like to do. But there's more to it this time around, with them exclaiming their familiarity with barbed wire, jumping over it, getting cut by it. They go into detail about how they want to use the barbed wire on the Funks, with a crappy Johnny Grunge line about taking the N out of Funks. Some middle school line right there, if I've ever heard it. Felt like they made a bunch of dated references after that with their random dialogue, and we get the full intro to the show proper in parts, leaving room for a Jason and the Pitbulls promo. Jason wastes space asking about how Taz likes his suit, his game plan, or his Pitbulls. The Pitbulls step forward, with Pitbull, the original TM, saying that he can't be stopped, and everyone should be prepared. Well, they can't be stopped. But he did also refer to himself and his tag team partner as a singular being in a strange way. So, I mean, I guess that still works technically. The intro continues on with recaps clips of last week's post-match beatdown after the TV title match and Sabu attempting to murder Chad Austin, as well as the standoff between 911 and Mr. Hughes. We got a replay of Tommy Dreamer's beatdown and Shane Douglas's promo from the end of last week's episode, and the intro finally concludes after 10 minutes into the broadcast. I kid you not. These go-home shows can be pretty nothing at times. So we cold open into the advertised Tazmaniac and Jimmy Snuka match, being welcomed in by a returning Joey Styles. Oh, how I missed his incessant yelling. Joey Styles did his best to make this match interesting, but Jimmy Snuka's best spot is bitching at the ref to stand still and let Jimmy do his job. I kid you not. Mans did about nothing else during this match. Really was a whole lot of nothing. It was just mostly staring and lockups, meant to be a battle of presence. But it just wasn't coming off that way to me. You have to be intimidating to have a battle of presence, and only one half of this match had that in Taz. Because there was nothing for Tazmaniac to fear or revere about old man no bump Snuka. He should just suplex him up and down this ring and leave him limp on the side of it. That's what Taz does. They actually slap some meat with a shoulder check, but back to the stare down and circling one another. A double team attempt between Snuka and Hunter Q on the outside when the latter pulls down the middle rope. Tazmaniac reverses the Irish whip, however, and sent Snuka to tumble onto the apron. Tazmaniac hits a Northern Light suplex and gets the 3 count, even though Snuka Hogan 3'd it. So, winner is Taz. Thumbs up from me. Hunter Q gets into the ring and starts berating Jimmy Snuka in the corner. Calls him Monkey Boy amongst other things, and Tazmaniac looms, eventually trying to get Hunter Q to calm down. I double checked, and I couldn't get the context as it was right when Snuka grabbed Hunter by the collar, but tell you something, counter up by 1 from Hunter Q. However, Tazmaniac stopped Snuka from hitting Robbins, only for the Pitbulls to spring into the ring and get their licks in on Taz for the week. Hunter Q, Robbins, and Snuka flee the ring for the moment, but Snuka looks back and has to be stopped from going to the ring to help Tazmaniac. I found this whole bit to be weird, and sure enough, Tazmaniac made a comeback on the Pitbulls and turns the beatdown around. He gets a chair, which helped him stop the Rockin' Rebel running in, and then grabbed the wooden ring steps to fend off other roster members who ran in the ring to attempt to stop him, as he was just going rabid. Some dude even took an overhead belly to belly on the concrete to end the segment in a very out of nowhere manner. He just kind of like ran into shot, boop, there's your suplex, on with your day. I love seeing Taz kick ass, but this is a very bizarre segment that I can't tell the intent of. Maybe to turn Jimmy Snuka babyface? Not quite sure. Gross misuse of Taz regardless. Well, we're working with Snuka a bit. The ending bit was actually pretty rad, where he just kind of went wild on everyone. Quite literally. So we get a rundown for the Saturday Supercard, which now includes Mikey Whipwreck defending his title against Chad Austin. Interesting. We'll get into that in a bit. We return to ringside with Sandman making his entrance, and we cut to a pre-tape promo where Sandman's audio didn't work for 5 seconds, but then he got paged from Mikey Whipwreck. Sandman asks woman what they're going to do with this kid, to which she responds they're going to make him pay his bill. So, is the payment a title match? Does that mean Sandman is in 2 matches at the Saturday Supercard if he wins? Against Tommy Cairo and Chad Austin? Or do both matches remain the same and then the TV title is instead contested for in the Dueling Canes match? Pertinent questions to me, and probably only me. We cut back down to the ring for Mikey Whipwreck's entrance and woman announcement because she needed it as a not competitor in this match. 2 minutes later, she gets slowly escorted to the ringside by Sandman before slamming, and then slowly gets back into the ring. The match is on. Rinse, repeat that ass beating. I'm starting to think that this TV title run is just one elongated hazing ritual that Mikey Whipwreck is going through. Just poor lad. Got tossed out of the ring a few good times for the sake of woman getting in some kicks, and Sandman really took his time playing to woman. He went up to the top for a few diving whatever the fucks onto Mikey before having woman light his cigarette. He goes up to the top with a cigarette a third time as the ref is caught up with woman and takes a cane shot from Cairo from behind. The ref turns around as Cairo gets into the ring, not having seen him hit Sandman, but Tommy cracks Whipwreck over the head in front of everyone to give Whipwreck the DQ victory. The streak continues. Sandman takes a gnarly 10 or so shots at the top of the head from Cairo, and damn, they are brutal. Sandman was a gushing. I'll give it to him. He was all in on that. Kind of insane of him, but I digress. That was an alright one. I think Chad Austin should take it off of Mikey. That or be Mikey's first real title defense. The bid is officially old to me. Not a bad segment overall, though. Was a nice change of pace with Sandman and Cairo. I will give them that. Up next, we got a promo from Public Enemy as they entered the venue, it seemed. They rambled on about what the Funks did to Rock, and they need to find another hoodie to team with tonight, as they got a 6-man they have to compete in. It was much more out there and incoherent than I made it out to be just now, but it's just the way things are at this point with Public Enemy. So they stumble onto Hack Myers, and Hack Myers looks stoned out of his mind, completely toasted. Like, in kayfabe, he had to have been on something. Couldn't even answer them when Grunge had him by his sideburns, asking him what his name was. He cannot affirmatively, once he's asked if he's ever been behind bars. So Public Enemy takes a liking to him once they find out he's from Murphy Homes, wherever that is. Once Hack confirms he knows who Public Enemy is, while still being high off his ass, Public Enemy rip off his crop top and bestow Grunge's sweaty shirt onto Hack. Grunge covers his ears to talk to Rock, saying Hack is good for the night. They say that they found themselves homeless Hack Myers, the camera putting over the hopeless hoodie, and sent us off to break. This was a fun segment, a messy one, but fun all the same. So we return from break, and we get an odd backstage promo from Shane Douglas and Mr. Hughes. Well, it's kind of odd at first, then Shane saved it, like he does. We start off with Shane saying that he's been a star quarterback all his life, and he's always had a great offensive line in front of him. So as quarterback, he's telling Mr. Hughes, his offensive line, that if anyone gets in his way, to take care of them. Mr. Hughes goes on to say that he isn't paid a lot of money to stand around the ring and look pretty. He says that he has something for 911 if he wants to step in front of the franchise, and that is that Mr. Hughes will take him out. Shane Douglas takes it back, saying that you can call it insurance if you'd like. But now we get into, the meat of the promo that was actually good. And he says that this Saturday night we find out what the future of wrestling is all about. Shane says that he claims to be the real deal because he's the man who wears the gold. He does this day in and day out by blood, sweat, and tears. And that's why in 1994 and in 2004, they'll be calling the franchise the epitome of wrestling. He mentions that he's invited both Bret Hart and Ric Flair to come to Philadelphia and find out who the greatest ever is, but they haven't accepted. Shane brings up how he was flipping through TV the other night, having seen Sherry, and made a jab at Ric Flair, calling him Bob Barker. Got a pop out of us on the watch along. Said that Sherry took a wrong turn, and everyone else has gone the other path. But the wrestling world is looking at ECW because of Mr. Hughes and the franchise, and that Sabu will get a taste of him this Saturday. Really good promo from Shane Douglas. It was the same song and dance from Mr. Hughes in it, but Shane Douglas is killing it with these promos week in and week out, so it's hard to care when it comes to Mr. Hughes doing his one thing over and over. Nothing else, it's establishing themselves for new viewers than probably just seeing the program for the first time, So, we return from break, to a disassociated Chad Austin coming down to the ring in his own branded Letterman jacket. Good for him. The jacket, not the disassociation. He makes a point that he came out here last week and survived Sabu and shits on the crowd for cheering him, calling them scumbags. Just then, Jason and Rockin' Rebel come down to the ring. Looks like we're set for a match between Chad Austin and Rockin' Rebel. Chad tells Rebel he's got a present for him and lays down, telling Rebel to pin him. Rebel gets on him, about to throw a punch, and Chad was like, whoa, just pin me. So he did, and got the 3 count. Chad Austin turned heel by just lying down. I love it. It's hilarious. He dedicated the loss to all the scumbags who used to cheer for him. Rockin' Rebel gets on the mic and thanks Chad Austin, saying Chad was his toughest opponent yet. Chad tells him to not forget it as we get some replays of the non-match to send us off to the next segment. So he cuts to the back, where a woman rants on about how much she loathes Tommy Cairo and everything about him. She says that apparently what one can't have, one must can. In regards to Tommy Cairo almost hitting women with the kendo stick. Sandman questions if Tommy Cairo is DTF in the most aggressive and self-harming way possible, whacking himself with a Singapore cane in the head as he asked Cairo if he wanted to bang. Demands payment, bloody Sandman, end scene. It's wild how he just loves getting whacked in the head. Really. We cut to Paulie on the roof, who says that a big topic of discussion is what the future of pro wrestling will look like, if anything. He says that even Terry Funk will tell you that wrestling will have grown into one of 2 things: the natural progression into the athlete such as Shane Douglas, or the whole new bizarre violent concept which has been spirited by Sabu. He also made another O.J. Simpson reference, because of course he did. I suppose he did all he could do at this point. Nothing bad here. In fact, great on him for keeping it under a minute. I'm just wondering if they're overhyping this match a bit too much. So we got a Public Enemy and Homeless Hack vibing in the ring, getting a feel for each other as a unit. Just as the Funk's music hits, Rocco Rock hops out of the ring and hides to the side of the entrance curtain. Right after they come out, that being the Funks and Tommy Dreamer, Flyboy whacks the Yester God with a chair. Grunge runs down to lay into Dory some more as Terry and Dreamer pursue Rocco Rock into the crowd. Public Enemy had a good game plan in divide and conquer here, as they dropped Tommy Dreamer as well. Terry ran them down to the ring, but the 3-on-1 got to him, even if high-ass Hack Myers just stood there and watched. So I suppose it was 2-on-1, but I digress. This match just broke down into a messy brawl in the ring before it really even started. The ref stood there, but it was only to be present. We got the Yester God going off on everyone, throwing them fun-ass lifters at everybody in sight. There was apparently a match going on, however, as Tommy Dreamer pinned the Hopeless Hoodie after a Bulldog on the steel chair. Sure enough, match was barely over before Shane Douglas himself blitzed the ring to beat up Tommy Dreamer, which eventually broke down to a pull-apart brawl with the whole roster out there trying to separate them. That is, until the Kaiju of Mr. Hughes and 911 have a standoff, bumping chests. Mr. Hughes hits him twice, and it's on before they're now pulled apart by everyone. Sabu eventually made it down to the ring before flying in and pounding on Shane Douglas. Terry Funk walks up with a chair around his head, throws a cracked wooden board into the ring as now everyone's fighting everyone. Complete and utter chaos in this promotion. Absolutely bonkers to go off the air for Hardcore TV, with Shane and Sabu getting gnarly with their bumps as they brawl to the outside, away from the mass of wrestlers, just seated, chair shot to the head unprotected, thrown into and over the barricade, put through a table, landing on some excess chairs. These two are just going at each other like the match had already started. So that was ECW for the week. And I gotta say, much better than their past go-home shows. The first half of the episode gave that same old vibe they usually have for their go-homes. But it got real crazy in here real quick. High-ass Hack Myers, Chad Austin handing out pinfalls. This episode was nuts. So that's it for this edition of Talkkcade. Hope you enjoyed this blind review. The Tell You Something counter was just at 1 this week. Astonishing, honestly, but I credit that to WCW not being reviewed on this episode. As I get blurry here right towards the end. Not going to try and edit that out, though. Oh, well. This was a good week of wrestling, with a good weekend to come. Things are definitely starting to turn up around this point in time, it seems. So, do drop a thumbs up on this video. Do comment on this video if you'd be so kind, and do join us throughout the week for the several different things we watch along to. First things first, Retro WatchaMania. It's effectively the precursor to this podcast, as my first time viewing of this wrestling is done with Jesse on Sundays, 7 p.m. BST, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, over at twitch.tv/CFGSouths. Souths. No, it's South. Singular. Here on the YouTube, however, we do weekly watch-alongs of all AEW programming. All of it. Dynamite, Rampage, Battle of the Belts, Collision when that becomes a thing, pay-per-views. We're not exclusively AEW, but that's the only thing we prioritize on the modern end for watch-alongs as of right now. Additionally, if you'd like gaming in any way, Jesse puts together the WatchaMania Invitational. 8 members of the community are represented by random CPUs in the game of the Champion's Choice. That typically is on Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, Saturday, 12 a.m. BST, before Rampage, should Rampage not be preempted. But that's all from me, y'all. I'm Advi Devin. Thanks so much for watching. Happy wrestling. Till next time. Peace.